Hello, welcome to episode 2 of the Books I Have Skimmed retrospective of the Compendium Maleficarum. Yes, I'm calling them retrospectives now. I think it makes me sound fancy. Anyway, onto the book. Chapter 8, The Power of Witches over External Things, has examples showing the full depth of Satan's majestic power. There was put to death at Trev some years ago a very famous witch who had inserted a pipe into the wall of her house, through which she charmed all the milk of her neighbours' cows. That is to say, the demon milked the cows, and instantly carried the milk to her house. But also far darker and slightly more perplexing stories. Duke Ratislav, the founder of Breslaw, went to war with his grandson, Bronislav, Duke of Bohemia. There was a woman who foretold that her own son-in-law, together with Ratislav and the greater part of the people, would fall in that war, but that the young man could escape if he would obey her. When the youth answered that he would obey her commands, she told him to kill the first man he met, then to make the sign of the cross with his sword on the ground between his horse's forefeet, then to cut off both the dead man's ears and put them in a bag and make haste to flee. So far, this witch's advice is to do the bare minimum and then run away, which isn't exactly magic, but I can see it working. But then, the battle was fought in a plain near Tuscus, and when Ratislav had been killed, the young man, having done as the old woman bade him, returned safe to his home, but found his dearly loved wife killed and her ears were cut off and her breast pierced, and was amazed and grieved to find that the ears he had cut off from his enemy were those of his wife. This was indeed a fit reward for consulting with a witch, and it may be that the wife was also a witch and had joined him in the battle after the manner of Bohemian women, or else the demon had set some deadly image on the battlefield and transferred the wounds which it had received to the wretched woman in the house. You know, I'm sure the excuse, the wounds I inflicted on my enemy were magically transferred to my spouse, would come in handy to 40% of police today. Moving on, Chapter 9, Whether the Devil Can Truly Enrich His Subjects, tries to close the gap in logic between the fact that the devil is a credible threat, but God is big and all-powerful. For I say that the devil, if God permits and he himself wishes, can enrich his subjects, and if God commanded him to do so, he would be compelled to obey, however unwilling he were. But only rarely does the devil wish this, and never does God command it, and very seldom does God permit it. And as the logic descends further into that of a fantasy novel, so too do the examples. About the year 1520 at Basel, a certain simple-minded tailor afflicted with a stammer somehow or other entered the cave which has its entrance at Augst, and, going further into it than any had ever gone before, said that he saw marvellous sights. He said that after burning consecrated corn he went into the cave, and you can tell from this that it's going to be an interesting story, because corn people are weird. He first went through an iron gate, then from one room to another, and so into a most beautiful flower garden. In the midst was a magnificently decorated hall, where he saw a very beautiful virgin with a golden diadem upon her head and her hair flowing loose, but the lower part of her body ended in a horrible serpent. This virgin led him by the hand to an iron chest, which was guarded by 2 black Molossian hounds, which by their baying prevented any from approaching. But the virgin in some wonderful manner calmed them, and taking a bunch of keys from her neck, opened the chest and displayed every sort of gold, silver and copper money, and he said that the virgin gave him no small sum of this money, which he brought back out of the cave. He added that the virgin said she was a king's daughter who had always led a devout life, but that she had been changed by an evil spell into that monstrous shape, and there was no other hope of her recovery than for her to be kissed 3 times by a youth of unimpaired chastity, for then she would be restored to her former shape, and would give as a dowry to her liberator the whole treasure hidden in that place. He asserted also that he twice kissed the virgin, and twice saw upon her face such a horrible gloating at the thought of her liberation, that he was afraid that he would not escape from her with his life. Afterwards he was taken by some loose boys into a brothel, and could never thereafter find the approach to the cave, to say nothing of entering it again. Who does not understand the illusion? The young man was not quite in his right senses, or a devil of the class of Elami tempted him to kiss her, so that she might devour him after the 3rd kiss, but God did not permit it. The 2 dogs were other demons, or may have been the true or pretended guardians of the treasure. The money was perhaps real and given with the permission of God. Some years later, another citizen of Basel entered the cave purporting to relieve his family's property. He found nothing but the bones of human corpses, and seized with a sudden panic rushed out and behaved so extravagantly that he perished miserably in 3 days. I'd like to think this is a story just made up by this poor stammering tailor so he could look cool enough to hang out with the loose boys and go to the brothel with them. Chapter 10, whether witches can by their art create any living thing, says that witches can, in a moment, produce imperfect animals such as flies, worms, frogs, and such insects and other animals which are generated by putrefaction, and goes on to snub them by saying, the witches themselves, for the most part, do not know how these are produced. Which is pretty big talk for an author who only a paragraph before was espousing spontaneous generation. He gives an example. A huge stone was being split open in a certain quarry, where there appeared 2 dogs equal in size to that stone, and from no perceptible hole there sprang these same dogs, which were of the kind called harriers, but fierce-looking, strongly smelling, and very shaggy. And one of them, it is said, quickly disappeared, but the other, which is said to have been extraordinarily voracious, was kept in luxury for several days by Henry, Bishop of Westminster. These dogs could not, I think, have been generated except from prolific semen, but the devil was able to take them from their mother's womb and hide them in that place. Now the logic of that story is a little hard to follow, but I think the thrust of it is that the devil can't make dogs, because all dogs are good boys. Such good boys! He says that demons can also bring forth strange monsters like that in Brazil, which is 17 palms high, has a lizard skin, very swollen paps, the forelegs of a lion, deadly eyes, and flaming tongue, or like those monsters in the forests of Saxony, of half-human appearance, which were captured in 1240. And I tried to look up this reference to a Middle Ages Bigfoot, but unfortunately De Natura Daemonium has never been translated out of Latin. I'd say I'm disappointed by this, but if I said that, I'd seem like I was appreciating the work of Montague fucking Summers. No thank you. Then there's a lengthy example about a woman being forced to marry an ape, which ends with the interjection, "Does this surprise you, reader?" A phrasing that seems to imply that this book takes place in the Pride and Prejudice extended universe. Chapter 11, whether there truly are incubus and succubus devils, and whether children can be generated by copulation with them, which explains at length about how succubus steal sperm that incubus then squirt into ladies to cause surprise babies, which I suppose is a handy excuse for both wet dreams and unexplained pregnancies, as long as you don't get burned at the stake for them. And in the examples, in the coasts around Moray Firth, a highly born girl of great beauty refused several noblemen in marriage and fell into an abominable familiarity with an incubus devil. When her parents commanded her to tell whether this were true and to discover her paramour, she said that a marvellously beautiful youth had frequent intercourse with her by night, and sometimes by day, but she did not know whence he came or whither he went. Her parents did not entirely believe the girl, and formed a plan by which they should learn more exactly who it was who had stormed the fortress of their daughter's virginity, and when, 3 days later, they were informed by a serving maid that the paramour was present, they bolted the house doors, and, lighting many torches, went into the bedroom where they saw in their daughter's arms a horrible monster whose appearance was terrible beyond human imagination. Others quickly ran up to see the foul sight, among them a priest of most holy life, not unlearned in the rituals of exorcism, who, while the rest were running away in terror or stood rooted to the ground with horror, began to recite the Gospel of St. John. And when he had come to, the Word was made flesh, the evil demon gave a terrible cry, set fire to all the furniture, and departed, carrying with him the roof of the bedchamber. The girl, having escaped from this danger, gave birth to a monster of utterly loathsome appearance, such had never before been seen, as it was said, and lest it should be seen and bring disgrace upon her family, the midwives lit a huge fire and quickly burned it. Oh god, this is depressing. Have a brief, fluffy animal break. A little earlier, the same author tells of a succubus devil as follows. In the district of Garryotha, in a village not 14 miles from Aberdeen, a young man of great beauty openly complained before the Bishop of Aberdeen that for many months he had been tormented by a succubus devil. As they say, more beautiful than any woman he had ever seen. I like that by now, even this guy whose life's work is to convince you of the severity of these demons' risk, is getting kind of bored of this more than you can possibly imagine trope. He said that she came to him by night through locked doors, coaxed and forced him into her embraces, and went away as the dawn began to break with scarcely any sound, and that he could by no means, though he had tried many, be delivered from so great and foul a madness. The excellent bishop at once ordered the young man to remove himself to another place, and to apply his mind more than usual to the Christian religion, with more devout fasting and prayer, and so, following the advice of the venerable bishop, the young man was, after a few days, delivered from the succubus devil. Oh, to live in a simpler time when you could approach the Bishop of Aberdeen to complain that you haven't woken up with dry sheets for several months. Anyway, chapter 12, where the witches are really transported from place to place to their nightly assemblies, which has another unfair gotcha clause for people accused of witchcraft, because it says that the devil can and does place a false body in the bed to deceive the husband while a witch has gone to the sabbat, Because just because you were there in bed with your husband all night doesn't mean he can't also accuse you of going out to consort with the devil. While flipping through the next bit, I noticed, largely due to the picture next to it, a mention of kissing the devil upon the buttocks. Although I know, vaguely, that the way you greet the devil is not to kiss him upon the buttocks, but upon the anus. I wondered if perhaps this was the author being squeamish in some way. I wondered if this might be a deliberate mistranslation, so I pulled up the original Latin copy, and sure enough, homage eum in Podice Osculantur, or kiss him on the anus in homo. Although it does make sense that Summers would choose to censor this bit, seeing as the whole translation was motivated by misogyny born from repressing his sexuality. He's hardly going to go to all this trouble only to willingly write about butt stuff. He goes on to describe the horrible feasts they have after having met with the devil, where the food is so evil and dry that you have to spew it out. Then follow dances, which are performed in a circle but always round to the left, and just as our dances are for pleasure, so their dances and measures bring them labour and fatigue and the greatest toil, and they return home from them so weary, according to the confession of Barbalina, that nearly all witches who have attended them, that they have often had to lie abed for 2 full days. And it's really not fair that waking up tired could be used as proof of witchcraft. It's nothing sacred. And the most sorry and most iniquitous thing about it is that no one is allowed to excuse herself from the dance, and if any of them, by reason of ill health or old age, shirks that labour, she is soon beaten and bruised by fists and feet, just as salted fish is beaten with hammers. And then he quite brazenly reuses one of the woodcuts from a few pages before. Shoddy work, Francesco, shoddy work. After a few more examples of these excesses, he finishes, "Only I will add this, that they who assert that this is not true, but only a dream or illusion, certainly sin in a lack of true reverence to our Mother the Church, for the Catholic Church punishes no crime that is not evident and manifest, and counts no one a heretic unless he has been caught in patent heresy. Now for many years the Church has counted witches as heretics, and has ordered that they be punished by the Inquisition, and handed over to the secular courts, as is clear from the works of Sprenger, Nida, Nicolacci, and... Therefore, either the Church is in error, or they who maintain this belief. But he who says that the Church is in error over a matter concerning the faith is anathema." So that's that. They can accuse you of going to a sabbat even if you're lying asleep in your bed at night with witnesses, and if you try to deny it, you're calling the Church a liar, which is worse than being a witch in the first place. What we're looking at here is the distilled wisdom of centuries of witch hunters who were tasked with bringing justice in quantity rather than quality. Anyway, in the examples, there is a statement from a witch that says, "A day or 2 before the Sabbat, the witch is told by her guardian demon to prepare to go to the games, on such a night and at such an hour, and if she has any just cause to hinder her, she adduces it and is heard, provided that it is a true and legitimate excuse. But if she invents a false reason to excuse her attendance, she is not carried there against her will, but remains in her house. Yet as punishment for her lies, the demon so mightily torments her both in mind and body with continuous torture of the sharpest degree, and aches and pains both within and without, that she can have no rest by day or by night, and is always plagued, and everything that she does comes to nothing and is abortive. So to put an end to such great pain, she must confess her fault and promise on her oath that she will no more refuse to go to the Sabbat." Of course, this was written quite some time before the Industrial Revolution, so the idea of punishing you for taking time off work for personal reasons was just the purview of Satan himself. Now my eye is always drawn to those accidental, diagonally lined up spaces you get in text sometimes, and this one here is an absolute doozy. Look at that beauty. I don't know if these things have any kind of official name, but I always feel really pleased to have spotted one. A woman in the Diocese of Sabina practiced the diabolic art, and her husband, becoming suspicious, repeatedly questioned her, but she always denied the charge. But the husband retained his suspicions and anxiously sought to know the truth, and contrived so cunningly that one night he saw her anointing herself with some ointment, after which he flew away as quickly as a bird. He followed to see where she was going, but lost sight of her, and going to the door of the house he found it shut, which gave him great surprise. On the following day he again asked his wife what he so eagerly wished to know, until, so that she could no longer plead ignorance, he openly told her all that he had seen her do the night before. Ugh. Brace yourself for some very Catholic relationship advice. And then soundly thrashed her, since it is wisely said that an obstinate heart is broken by the rod. Ugh, Jesus fucking Christ. And he threatened to beat her even more severely unless she told the truth, promising her a full pardon if she would freely confess. The woman, seeing that she could no longer hide it, told the truth and asked pardon of her husband, which he granted on condition that she would take him to the Sabbat. To obtain forgiveness, she readily promised this, and with the permission of Satan fulfilled her word. The husband was taken to the place of the Sabbat, and saw the games and dances and everything else, and finally sat down with the rest at the tables to eat. But finding the food was insipid, he asked for salt, and, although there was none on the table, kept asking again and again for it, but was not given any until after much importunancy and long waiting. Then he said, "Praise be to God, for at last the salt has come." As soon as he had uttered these words, the demons immediately departed, and all the rest vanished, and the lights were put out, and he remained there alone and naked. In the morning he saw some shepherds, whom he asked in what country he was, and they answered that it was Benevento. Side note, the region of Benevento turns up a lot in these old witchcraft stories. During the Roman Empire it was a major seat of worship of the goddess Isis, and after the fall of the empire it was invaded by the Lombardians, who worshipped the god Wotan there, by nailing a goat skin to a walnut tree. And so, of course, the Christians held a pretty dim view of the place and lumped all of these assorted things under the one banner of witchcraft. And they answered that it was Benevento in the kingdom of Naples, which was 100 miles from the man's own country, so although he was a rich man he had to beg his way home, and on his arrival he at once accused his wife of the crime of witchcraft and told the judges the whole story and how she had departed. And when they had well and duly examined the matter they found that all we have related to be true, and it was all confirmed by the woman's own confession. And I think we can all picture exactly this guy. You know, the guy who gets taken to a dinner hosted by Satan where he is served by demons, but his main complaint is that there's not enough salt, so he loudly, passive-aggressively complains to no one in particular, and then snitches on his wife after he promised that he wouldn't, because his actions screwed him over. And he's meant to be the goody, and we wonder why Western society is fucked. Over the page is the story of a man called Claude, who on his way home witnessed 6 witches dancing around a table bedecked in gold and silver, watched over by a huge black bull-like demon. Claude approached the table and the demon attacked him, but then vanished. Claude recognised one of his friends at the table, so the next day he dobbed them in to a judge, and in the trial the witches say that the demon only attacked Claude because he tried to steal the gold from them. It's not really clear what this story's trying to say. It's not even clear what it's an example of. It's just a story. And there are a whole load of similar other stories that are messy little things describing how witches meet and how we know about this. At least one of them has a goat that lights candles by farting on them. When I pulled this off my shelf, I didn't realise just how grim this was going to be. I need another break. I will see you again in the 3rd and final episode. Take care.